So good evening, everybody. And once again, we are back with this Civil's daily initiative of daily answer writing. So we have started with day one once again. We will continue this cycle for like 2 weeks and then again start with day one so that the enthusiasm does not go down. And we will be covering the question again, which we had given in the morning. And then we will move on to checking the evaluation and feedback of copies that you have submitted before 2 p.m. Again, today many guys have written the answers, and all of them, I have seen many of them, and most of the answers are very good. I think you all have improved greatly in writing the answers, and you are benefiting from this initiative. Also, this peer review process is also going on pretty well. Try to peer review more and more so that you yourself also understand some like nitty gritties of answer writing and how to make the answers better. In the meanwhile, you can also check the good copies which I post in the group. For this session also, I will post the good copies in the group. So, starting with today's question, the question today was, in light of the recently declared National Mission on Edible Oils, oil palm, critically examine economic and environmental implications of promotion of oil palm cultivation in the country. So this was a GS3 question. Now this mission is pretty important because this has been again released with very हो हल्ला कि हमारा जो imports है वो बहुत ज़्यादा है. Our imports are pretty much high with regards to this edible oil. So we wanted to be self-sustainable because it was a very taxing thing on our economy. So for to achieve those things, this mission was launched, and let us see what all we could have written in this answer. Again, we will go with that basic formula of introduction, and then we will check out what we can write in the body of this answer, and then we will go for the conclusion. So again, in this answer, if I say you the keywords here are basically this critically examine is very important keyword, as I have told you guys that in critically examine you need to look at both sides of the issue. Like you need to look at both the positive effects and the negative effects. However, the scope here was a bit restricted again because this is a 10 marker question and they have clearly asked this economic and environmental implications. So you had to analyze this mission on the basis of economics and on the basis of environment and talk about the positive and negative aspects this mission will bring about. So let us start with the introduction. In the introduction, as you can see, I have just basically talked about this mission, introduced what all is there. So National Mission on Edible Oils, Oil Palm is a centrally sponsored scheme with a special focus on the Northeast region and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Now this government is also has also been focusing on the Northeast region a lot, and it is said that the Northeast region can really make us self-sufficient in this oil palm. So the focus here is on the Northeast region and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Through the mission, government is trying to increase the area under oil palm cultivations from present 3.7 lakh hectares to 10 lakh hectares. So this is basically the objective of the mission. So I have in one line just to present a data point, as I have said you guys that in introduction a data point is pretty good. It impresses the examiners. So I have, and it also covers here the objective, the core objective of the mission. So I have mentioned it here. To increase the area under oil palm cultivations from present 3.7 lakh hectares to 10 lakh hectares. Also, there are various economic and environmental implications of promotion of oil palm cultivation in the country. This is just a connecting statement so that the examiner understands what is going to come forward in this answer. So basically, these lines are sufficient to introduce this answer. Again, you did not have to go into the nitty gritties of the objectives like 3-4 points. You did not have to write here because that is not being asked, and since it is not a 15 marker, also only a 10 marker answer. So I think this is sufficient for the introduction. Next, we will go on to the body of the answer. So here in the body, I have like tried to tabulate it, mention it in a tabular form so that you can understand it better. Like this is also a good strategy of presenting the answers. Here also, like this also reduces the word limit along with improves the look of the answer. Like both the things, positive and negatives, if I write separately, I think I'll exceed the word limit and all. Also, the space given is only 2 pages, so I think this is a better way of presenting such answers. So first, I talk about the economic implications of oil palm cultivation. So the most important implications I can say is to reduce India's high import dependence. Now the here what many of you what you have done is like you have just jotted down the points. So I will say you that now you can start focusing on ordering the points also. Like try to write the most important points first, and then go for writing the less important ones. So that if you miss the important points, that is also fine. But the most important points for an answer should not be missed. So here, these like reducing high import dependence is one of the most important objectives you can say of this mission. So I have mentioned it at the top only. It will reduce India's high import dependence of 70% in edible oil. Again, domestic production will increase availability of edible oil, and this will also help reduce the food inflation. As you all know, the oil prices are always pretty high. So if the edible oil prices get lower, so it will also help us in tackling the food inflation. So I have talked about that. So this is all like core economics point of view. Again, this I have written a related point, like low price will improve access and choice in food and nutrition for the poor. So what will happen is, like if the price is low, so they will go for this healthy edible oil. Like for example, who are currently dependent on hydrogenated vanaspati, like this is a very unhealthy alternative. Although it is a bit cheaper, but this is an unhealthy alternative. So if you go for the healthier alternative, the out of pocket expenditure on health issues will reduce. So that is also an important point from the point of view of economics, or you can say the inclusive growth of the poor. So this point I've written. After that, I've also written about this high yield of oil palms of up to 4 to 10 times of other oil crops suits the constraint of cultivable land in India. Again, so you know that we are a very populous country with like our land resources are pretty less. You can say that we have only 4 to 5% of land area along with 17% of population. So with that land area, we have to sustain such a large population. So always there is an issue of cultivable land. And now high yield of oil palms, what this will do will this will uh, it will suit this like constant since the yield is high, since other from other oil crops, so the cultivable land will be used more effectively. Next, I have talked about this can also increase. This is like again, I have told you that this is just a generic point, but also like this is an important point, but this should not be mentioned as the first point. Increased investment will help create jobs and ameliorate socio-economic conditions of farmers. Now, this is basic since if any industry is established or anything like industrial activity or services activity takes place, you can think about this that jobs will be created, and that will help the condition of the farmers as well as the labor section of our society. So I have talked about that. And next, I have gone on to talk about the negatives in the same table itself. Now, one of the issues with oil palm is long gestation period. Like there is a very long period, it takes a long time to the crop from planting to yielding. So that is a long gestation period. So this makes oil palm an unattractive choice for small farmers. So it is really doubtful whether the small farmers will go for this crop, because since they are basically doing sustainable farming, so they will want money in their hands quite soon. But the long gestation period of this crop makes it unfavorable for that. So you can talk about that. Next, high water demand of oil palm will create water stress in agricultural economy. We already know that our country faces a severe water stress, and most of our water goes for the agriculture sector. And again, since this is also a water guzzling crop, you can say high water demand is there, so it might create again water stress in this agricultural economy. Next, I have talked about this traditional rights and ways of living of tribes in Andaman and Nicobar Islands will come under stress. So, if you cut down the forests or those traditional societies where these tribes live, their like daily existence depended on this minor forest produce and all. So, this will again impact their earnings and their existence basically. So, the traditional rights and ways of living of tribes in Andaman and Nicobar Islands will come under stress. So, this is my third point. So I think that will be sufficient for writing the economic implications. Next, I go on to talk about the environmental implications, because that has also been exclusively asked. Now you can notice here that I'm not writing anything from my own. I'm just picking the subheadings from the question itself and then trying to address it. Like even if I have to form some points, over some points, I will stick to writing on this topic only. I'll not go for something I know. Rather than I will choose innovating or creating some points on the topic which is given to me. So that is a better approach, I will say. So again, in environmental implications, first I have talked about the positive implications. So high yield of oil palm will minimize the need of deforestation compared to other oil crops. So this is again a relatable point from that cultivable land. So what happens is like since the yield is high, we need lesser land. So lesser land means lesser need for deforestation, and again that is better from an environmental point of view. Next, this is also a point related to environment, but not related to India. I will say India's reduced dependence on imports from Malaysia and Indonesia will help reduce ecological damage of large oil plantations in those regions. Now, these most of our import of edible oil comes from the Southeast Asian countries like Malaysia and Indonesia. So, if we start growing our own crop of oil palm, so we will stop importing this, and this will help reducing the ecological damage happening in those countries. So that is also an important point. Basically, the net carbon thing comes here. That is also positive implications of growing the focusing on the oil palm cultivation. Next, I have talked about the negative implications of negative environmental implications of the oil palm cultivation. So the rich flora and fauna of northeastern Andaman Nicobar Islands, including bird species, medicinal plants, and rare undiscovered species, can face extinction. Now, as you all know, that the northeast is one of the hotspots of our countries. So if we start growing oil palm, it will disturb the natural habitats of many birds and plants. So which is again an adverse consequence environment wise that we'll have to face. Next, I've talked about limited freshwater streams, virgin coasts, and corals can be permanently damaged due to affluent discharge from oil production. So oil production is always comes along with an affluent discharge, and now this will be discharged into the pristine water of the northeast. If you go to the northeast, you will see that most of the fresh water bodies there are pretty clear. Clear water is present, so that will be destroyed if we start producing oil palm on a mass scale. Next, the burning the woods for clearing vegetation for oil palm plantation creates issues of air pollution. Again, air in the northeast is very good. So when we do the deforestation and start producing this oil palm, so we will have to burn the woods, and that will again create air pollution. So you can see that I have tried to like create points, create these negative implications of oil palm cultivation. So next, I have talked about loss of forest cover to accommodate oil plantations would effectively mean release of carbon dioxide due to loss of carbon sink potential of evergreen forests. So again, evergreen forests are present in that region, so that will affect our commitments. You can mention here like our commitments of Paris commitments COP26, and again the recent commitments of that Amrit Kal and all. So you can talk about that our targets will be hard to achieve for us if we do this. Loss of forest cover will lead to loss of carbon sink potential of these forests. So this was basically the body of the answer, where I have talked both about the positives and negatives of the oil palm cultivation in the context of economics as well as environment. So that was the core demand of the question which you needed to address, and these four parts were pretty necessary for you to write. If you miss any of these, marks would have been deducted for sure. Next, I talk about the conclusion. For here, you can see that since already I've taken up so much space for writing this negatives and positives, I have omitted the way forward for a 10 marker, and just you can say that I've integrated this conclusion along with the way forward for like a futuristic conclusion. So the conclusion here is, though domestic production of oil palm is very much required, it should not be at the cost of country's biodiversity. So again, I have tried to balance this as well. For example, since the question is talking about critically examining, so they are understanding that this might have negative impacts. So I've tried to take that into my concern and mention that there should be a balance between the biodiversity and the domestic production of oil palm. Next, ecological safeguards are needed, and the goal should be to create environmental friendly and sustainable domestic palm oil production capacity. So, all in all, we know that we need to produce this palm oil. So, because our import bills are pretty high due to this edible oil, and so we cannot say that we don't need to, and especially in this light of this Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative that was launched amidst so much of hoalla. So after that, you cannot say that we cannot be just importing. So I have talked about that, and then mentioned that although we need that, but ecological safeguards are also needed, and the goal should be to create environment-friendly and sustainable domestic oil palm production capacity. So this was my answer overall, basically. So I think most of you have written along these lines only, and we will check out some of the answers again in this session, and then uh, give you the marks also. And the next after the session, I will announce the best copies in the Telegram group. Meanwhile, if you have any doubts, you can ask me in the chat box. So good evening, Saiba. Good evening, Vivek. Good evening, Nisha. So let us now move to the copies that I think I should review some of these copies. First of all, let us move to Ritu's copy and see what she has written. Recently, GOI announced 11,000 crore scheme of. Okay, this is fine. So anything is fine. You can mention this like the amount, or you can also talk about the like area of cultivation that the government plans to increase, reduce import dependency on palm oil, boost domestic production, and achieve. Okay, this is fine. Introduction is good. While the need of NMEO-OP excessive. Okay, again, like this is okay, but I think this was not that much required. But since you have used a flowchart, it's fine. Let us see whether you have covered other aspects or not. However, cultivation of palm oil comes with certain economic. ठीक है, this is good environmental implication. Loss of biodiversity, climate change. ठीक है, monoculture, water incentive, water in water sensitive crop. You can write here. I don't know what you have written. 50% farming rainfall in India. Okay. So, like here, you can talk about the water stress in India. So that will be also be better. Economic implications is also one big. So, for example, you have not talked about the positive implications of environment here. Like those 2 points that I have talked about, like implications in like reducing the net carbon sink. Because if we start producing on the countries that were producing for us, those countries need to drop down the production, and that will help environment in that part of the in that part of the world. So you can talk about that also. Next, economic implications are fine. Big corporate houses, huge subsidies, at cost of other edible oil like groundnut production, land allocation. So again, you have just talked about the negatives. However, the positives, especially the economic implications, are pretty very much large. For example, first, the import cost will be reduced. That is a big economic implication of production that you should have mentioned. Next, you could have also talked about like the health benefits of the poorer sections that will lead to the inclusive development and all. Next, you can talk about inflation here. It will also help in reducing the prices of edible oil, and that will overall help in tackling the food inflation. So those things can creating jobs can also be added. So I think those things you have missed here. You have just gone on for writing the negatives in both parts. So I think marks will be deducted for that. However, certain steps can be taken to reduce impacts. Increase in edible oil incentives. So here, like in way forward, what you have written, you can mention these things in the positive impacts, positive economic impacts, rather than just going to talk about the way forward. See, since the mission is in a very nascent stage, everything is a way forward basically. Like whatever I am talking about, the economic implications or the environmental implications, all of those are going to happen. So the whole answer is based on basically what will be happening according to what has been prescribed by the government or what the government thinks. So you need to talk about those things in the body of the answer itself, right? Rather than talking in a separate way forward. Strategic implementation to be done with multi-stakeholder approach to avoid the. So again, you have written a lot of content, but I think the structuring of this answer could have been better, Ritu. What you could have just done is like mentioned the address these two parts in a better way. Both the positives and the negatives of according to the environment and economy could have been mentioned first, and then you could have gone to talk about the way forward and all if you had space left. Otherwise, the answer is good. Like some of the points that should be there have been mentioned here, but I think the structuring will cost you some marks here. So overall, I think 4 out of 10 is what you will get for this answer. Next, I move to Manuj Anshu's copy. As 44% of palm oil is used in food products in India, NMEO was launched to become self-reliant by. Okay, however, production of oil palm cultivator has. Okay, ठीक है. Objectives like you can write in this manner. This is like very small and short, so this is fine rather than taking up too much space. Benefits are fine, like reducing port. These things should have been written. ठीक है, multiple users is also fine. Again, some extra points could have been added, but it is still good. Agroclimatic diverse crop tree cover by replacing agriculture. So this point is not clear. Like, what do you mean by like increasing tree cover by replacing agricultural land? Actually, agricultural land needs to be. We need to get the agricultural land from by deforestation. So this is not a very suitable point here. Methane emissions replacing rice cultivation is usually done in like northwest of the country. So I don't think that is also a very relevant point here. North Northeast does not produce so much of rice, or Andaman, like either in the eastern part of India, or you can say that Punjab, Haryana, UP, Western UP belt produces rice mostly. So there, I don't think we are going to grow oil palm. Again, this is also fine. This approach is also good. Like you have first mentioned the positives and then gone on for the negatives. Ecological concerns, okay. Health risks again is not a very relevant point here because I think we already use very uh, hydrogenated oils, so that in fact it will be better to use this own edible oil. This is fine. Long break-even period, need of financial support, tribal discontent. This is okay, good. So overall, good answer. Like you have got the structuring also pretty fine. You have mentioned, understood the demand of the question basically. Just some of the points that I talked about can be rechecked once a bit, like this tree cover, rice cultivation, because most of the focus will be on the northeast and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands in this mission. So you can adjust your points according to that. Otherwise, I think overall the answer is fine, and you will get at least 5 out of 10 in this answer if you are able to reproduce such an answer in the exam hall. Next we move to Chinese answer. NMEO is center which fine, this is also good. So the scheme, though the scheme has prominent significance, a certain okay. So she has written well, like again, rather than using a table, she has drawn a flow chart and tried to explain it. It is expected to raise farmers' income. It will help to reduce dependence on imports. It will, you can mention some data here, like how much we import, how much edible oil we import, and how much we are targeting to reduce. So that will just be impressive. Otherwise, it is fine. If you don't remember, you can just mention this. It will make India self-reliant in palm oil and achieve carbon. These 2 points are basically same thing. So again, you can relate here to the health benefits, inflation, and all. So that will be advantageous for you. Next, about negatives, long gestation period is fine. Pricing formula has to be adopted with a likely long run average price of crude palm oil. Okay, farmers will be unable to realize that. ठीक है. Negatives is also okay, decent enough. Environmental implications, positives will help in planting gold gardens. Okay. So here you can check out those positives I told you about. For example, talking about overall reduction in carbon, increase in carbon sink, like the forests in those countries from which we are importing, there we can, those countries can reduce the production of this crop. Threat to wildlife is fine, invasive species will spread, interfering, okay, impact on tribals. Okay, negatives is also decent enough. Proper mapping and monitoring of land use through remote sensing, designing proper policies which will check reduction of forest along with meeting the raising import duty wherever import price of. Raising import duty is like not advisable because uh, first we need to be self-sufficient in production. Otherwise, again, that will lead to high inflation. Declare oil palm as oil plantation crop. Fine, this is okay. India is the largest consumer and importer of oil palm in the world. In order to reduce India's imports and become Atmanirbhar, must think holistically and adopt a long run. So here you could have just tried to balance your conclusion a bit. Like you could have just cautioned that there are environmental and economic implications of this. So we need to be careful regarding that. And after proper checks and balances, only we can go on with this mission. So that would have been a more better conclusion. Overall good answer. I think you will also get 5 out of 10 in this answer sign. Just some data points could have been increased, for example, especially in this imports and all things. Next, we move to Sachi's copy. Oil palm domestically importing approx 9 million tons from other countries with the consumption on a rising national mission on edible oils to attain self-sufficiency. Increase area under production, harness edible oil prices become part. So you have written basically a pretty lengthy introduction. You could have just reduced it. Uh, just go straight to the point now. Why there is need to talk about this rise in beauty products and food processing biofuel? It's fine, we know about that, but that has not been asked. So you can just talk about this mission. Like even if you wanted to write something, you could have more aggressively focused about writing about this mission, like objectives you could have mentioned. Yeah, like this thing is fine. So so you can see that you are taking just one page to just introduce your answer, basically objectives and this introduction part, which is not required overall. Diagram is fine. Impact on ecology, local community, programs okay, biodiversity, fine, water pollution, air pollution भी लिख सकते हो आप. Invasive species so will impact. So again here positive impacts are missing. So when you increase these things, some of your core part of the answer will go missing. So that is the point. Economy maybe you have just stuck to the positives. I think here you have not mentioned the negative impacts economically. So that could have also been mentioned here. Careful policy implementation can benefit the southern states of Andhra Pradesh with the right implementation of community and institutional measures. So you have the knowledge, but I think you just need to focus more on presenting the answer a bit better. For example, try to keep, for example, this line here is not needed in conclusion. This about Andhra and paddy production because that unnecessarily extends your conclusion and serves no purpose because that is not asked. And what happens is the main focus of the answer gets you get less space and less time for writing the main core demand of the answer. So focus more on that part. Try to innovate some points. If you don't even remember, try to think on some generic lines like environmentally क्या क्या हो सकता है अगर क्रॉप कुछ हम एक नया क्रॉप उगाना चाह रहे हैं तो कुछ ना कुछ तो होगा फॉरेस्ट को काटना पड़ेगा एयर पॉल्यूशन होगा वाटर पॉल्यूशन होगा फ्रेश वाटर बॉडीज इम्पैक्ट होंगे तो ये सब तो पॉइंट्स आप इनोवेट कर सकते हो यू कैन इनोवेट ऑल these पॉइंट्स देयर itself so you don't need that much of knowledge for that so try doing that rather than talking about extending your introduction and conclusion and all so I think you will get 3.5 out of 10 for this answer Sachi. Next we move to Pallav's answer. Then NMEO-OP is a centrally sponsored scheme with the objectives of freezing area. Okay, economics of the scheme, positive implication, viability formula, nature that fruit farmer provision of 5 crore protect industry. Okay, तो ठीक है ये सब पल्लव लेकिन यू फर्स्ट नीड टू टॉक अबाउट द मेन थिंग मेन ऑब्जेक्टिव so आप एक काम ये कर सकते हो जैसे what many people have done is like they have written objectives separately so study the objectives and try to pick your points economics wise and environment wise from those objectives like उस objectives में क्या benefit होगा हमको economically वो pick करिए वहां से और उसको फिर इस सब हेडिंग के अंदर डालिए so that will be better for example here import के बारे में आपने बात ही नहीं करी है which is one of the most important objectives so you need to talk about that. Next, these things are also fine. FDI includes why so I told you like you can add these points, but first mention the important points that need to be mentioned. Negative implications: farmer will require gestation, financial support. This is fine. Impact on subsidy and tariffs on palm oil and the issues stemming from the same at the WTO. ठीक है ठीक है Negative implications are fine. Environmental challenges of the scheme. Positive implications: rejuvenation ये कुछ ज्यादा इनोवेट किया आपने लग रहा है क्रिएशन ऑफ सीड बैंक एंड ऑल इज आई डोंट थिंक envisaged here but still it can be written if you don't it is better than writing like extended intros and conclusions Negative implications. The scheme focuses on Northeast and Andaman, both reaching palm oil is an invasive. Okay. Monoculture. Okay. Threat to indigenous oilseeds such as groundnut, sunflower, and mustard. Diversion production. Okay. While the NMEO is designed to reduce India's dependence on oil and make it Atmanirbhar, cost to the environment does not justify the scheme. नहीं नहीं does not justify मत लिखिए भाई ये does not justify is like again very blunt statement. So since I think more like more competitive and more competent people than us are formulating these schemes, so you cannot write like in such a way. Just say that we should be cautious. So for example, here you can just mention that and make it Atmanirbhar in power production. We should be aware of the costs of this scheme and plan accordingly. ऐसा आप लिख सकते हो. An alternative is focus on and their harmonious attraction. नहीं नहीं so don't go for just crossing out the scheme like that will impact in a negative manner. If you do this like इसके लिए फिर आपको you need to justify your answer pretty well. Like आपको फिर you need to write the advantages of this indigenous oil seeds and why they are better and why oil palm is not very good. So that we have not done in the body. If in the body we would have done that, you could have written that there. But here we are just talking about the impact. So keep a balanced and simple conclusion, futuristic, and I think that will be better. Otherwise, your structuring of the answer is fine, like intro, conclusion, and all is good. So you can write this answer. Just try to improve the conclusion part of it and try to write some more suitable points according to the subheading. So you can just go for reading once more about the scheme and pick those points from the core objectives of the scheme, and that will be better. That will be a more better answer. But still, I think you will get here 4 out of 10, Pallav. Next, we move to Vivek's copy. Consumption of edible vegetable oil, production of non-stick doesn't necessarily fuel important. No, no, so much of justification is not required in the introduction. Like, agar, why, if they had asked to compare you about the scheme, uh, like compare it over the already you indigenous oil seeds, then you could have talked about all those things. Although the graph you can just draw, but so you can just come here directly to this NMEO-OP thing. Like you can just start by talking about the scheme. Vessel emphasis ठीक है. First, let me see. Okay. Positives, negatives are fine, reduce costly imports and saves costing power. Fine, increase domestic production may stabilize okay, livelihood opportunities. So this is good. Like you have written positives in a good manner. High initial implementation cost chances. Okay, fine. Change from inputs. ठीक है, ये भी good. Environmental. That's better. So overall, good answer. I will say like you have addressed everything. Environmental implications could have been written also in a tabular format. Like positives, you could have mentioned some 1 or 2 extra points. So that would have been better, but still it is good. Like you have tried to address at least according to the question. और इसको भी like negatives को भी you can talk in a bit extended manner. Like यहाँ पे water pollution, air pollution सबकी बात कर सकते हैं आप. So all of those things could be mentioned here. So go for this format only. No, here this is good. So you can follow that here. Mission oil palm is a welcome step, however inclusive and participatory planning. So overall fine answer I will say क्योंकि सब कुछ आपने लिखा है तो I think it is good. Also map you have drawn. So आप इसमें कर क्या सकते थे ना like this first paragraph could have been integrated with this thing. So just इतना नहीं लिखना है just start mentioning कि since we are a high uh, in the light of our consumption of edible vegetable oil we need to be self sufficient and hence the government has launched this mission and then go on to talk about the mission. But still very good answer I will say. You will get I think 5.5 out of 10 for this answer, Vivek. So I think that will be it for today, guys. Again, we will meet tomorrow with a new question and new topic and like new discussion. So till then, keep answer writing, keep peer reviewing, also participate in the current affairs discussions and all. And I hope you are enjoying this whole initiative of answer writing, and uh, you will keep on continuing this in order to improve your answer writing skills. So that will be it for today, guys. So thank you very much. Again, we will meet tomorrow. So bye for now.